Hey, let's do this thing. We were just talking about Nicky. And I watched this on 1, but then I caught it on 3 off the interwebs. And 3 have a much better story because they have some of the details that they've seen about this big announcement tomorrow.
3 News can reveal Cabinet has agreed to set aside $900 million to buy 2 new Cook Strait.
Now, remember, the other 2 massive IREX ones were like $550 million. So these guys are paying, what, not quite twice as much again, just for the ferries.
Ferries. They'll be smaller than the previous new ships, which had a price tag of $551 million for 2.
There you go.
But that original project had an overall budget of $3 billion, which included major upgrades to ports. And as senior political correspondent Jenna Lynch explains, the ports will now be expected to fund the majority of any necessary upgrades themselves.
So here's the question that a journalist needs to ask NickyNewBoats.
What does that mean? Where do they get the money from?
Will the overall cost of this project, including the ports and the boats and the break fees, if you added all of those together, will it be less than $3 billion? I'd be prepared to place a large wager on the fact that it won't. And the only way they're able to do it is to basically turn the ports into user pays. Now, there are some words that are said in this clip where NickyNewBoats says things like our preferred choice or our preference is. And you're like, hang on, you don't even know yet? Because as soon as you say it's our preference, what you're saying is this is one of the options on the table. Listen real closely when that comes out.
Anchors away, the government's finally sailing toward a ferry fix. Just don't talk about it until tomorrow.
I'd love to give you some answers, but you need to wait until we make the announcement, which will be very shortly, as I said.
3 News has seen part of a paper which went to ministers, which details that $900 million has been set aside for the ships, while extra has been set aside for landside development costs.
The overall project costs will be lower than they would have been with Project IREX.
Crucially driving...
Yeah, lower because we're not going to do anything to the wharves. Now, if they don't need to upgrade the wharves... But if they don't need to upgrade the wharves, that means tiny ferries. If they need the wharves or the ports to pay for that, then that's still a part of the overall cost. The government's just going, well, we're going to spend less because we're going to make them pay for it, which means us. Remember, when it was being paid for before, we were already paying for that, but we had a great deal. Now they're saying you guys can pay for it, and then we get to say we're less than Labour. Well, you are less than Labour, but spending less than Labour, Chewie.
They are going to make this sound good by literally taking a chunk of the project out. That's the only way that they can make it work. And then it's going to get spoon-fed back to us because the ferries are going to be more expensive because every time they pull into port, they have to pay the port for the money for the upgrades. It is a street hustler card trick. They all think we're stupid.
It's the shell game.
Fantastic. Everything about IREX, everybody that commented on it said that we got a fucking sweet deal out of Hyundai, that it was a well put together project. The only people that said that it wasn't was National, based on nothing at all. They were
no. That's not quite true. Not based on nothing.
Is it not?
Based on the fact that they were trying to say Labour bad. So that's what they were trying to do.
Okay. So they were ferries that were designed to be future-proof. They were bigger because of our larger population, our heavier trucks. Rail-enabled. Now, there was a comment from Kiwi Rail this week that said, if these ferries aren't rail-enabled, we literally can't get rails to the South Island, and we'll have to build a production facility in the South Island so we can replace and build railway tracks. So are we going to factor in how much one of those costs?
Yeah, interesting.
No, why would we do that? The port facilities, we're talking about port facilities that are over 100 years old. Like, it needs to be done anyway. The one in Picton, it's already started and they just hit pause on it. This whole thing is so dumb. This should be, if only it was the only thing that would sink this government, the utter omni-shambles of this. I assume we will only get to see its full, glorious unfurling tomorrow. But there is no hope here. It is going to be a disaster.
Well, let's keep listening because, like I said, listen out for those words that make it sound like they don't have a final solution yet. Keep listening for them.
Down cost, the paper details that the ports are to fund as much landside infrastructure as possible.
Now, first of all, there's a word, as much as possible. What does that mean? We can afford 1 million, so we'll do 1 million. They are to fund as much as possible. What the hell does that mean when it comes to making this legislation? Listen to it again.
Are to fund as much landside infrastructure as possible.
So in other words, the ports are going to have to come forward with some money, it sounds like, to whatever they can afford. And then who pays the rest? Does that then come back to the government? Does that then go to a PPP? What comes next? So these are the words that I'm intrigued about for tomorrow.
And should look to recoup those costs through user pays.
User pays.
Are consumers going to pick up the tab for portside infrastructure if you make the ports pay for that?
Well, we will be making announcements about our preferred ferry solution later.
Did you get it? Preferred ferry solution. Preferred means there's options, Chewie. So they're making an announcement tomorrow and they have a preferred option. That means there's at least one other option which isn't quite as preferred. These are the words that have caused me to go, oh, what are we going to get tomorrow?
We'll be making announcements about our preferred ferry solution later in the week.
Preferred.
Labour fears that will mean increased costs of freighting, a tab that'll be picked up by consumers.
The ferries themselves are not going to be cheaper. So they're going to be buying more expensive ships.
Yep.
I think what they're doing is being a bit dishonest here by including cutting back on wharf and terminal upgrades and saying that that's somehow going to save money.
Only exacerbated if the smaller ships do not have drive-on, drive-off capability for trains.
Horrendously expensive. They're going to, we're estimating $150 to $200 per container. And then if you look at the extra turnaround time for all the tonnage that's going to be on these vessels, that's going to be a cost as well.
The paper also outlines that Cabinet will set up a schedule for a company, a Crown-owned company like the Kiwi Group, which owns Kiwibank, to procure the ferries.
Why did ACT, the party of smaller government, agree to creating a schedule for a company?
Because this is going to be one of the most effective ways. Sorry, what are you actually talking about?
Talking about the ferries.
Oh, I was trying to think what you were talking about.
ACT's leader catching himself before he let a Cabinet secret slip.
Well, if Cabinet had agreed on a 4A company, I wouldn't be giving that away or talking about it.
New Zealand First, a long proponent of rail, wouldn't be drawn on whether the ships will be rail-enabled.
Yeah, interesting, eh? Yeah. Actually, look, something you've said tonight I'd never really thought of. So you're actually saying that there's nowhere in the South Island that builds rail anymore. So
no,
therefore...
That's what Kiwi Rail said, their production facility for rails, which are 72 metres long, I believe. So if it's not
rail enabled, yeah, you can't get rail product from the north to not just about your stuff on the rails, but the physical rail like carriages and stuff themselves. I mean, is that physically, can it go into a boat? Do you have any ideas? Would they have to boat them down?
So this is the ridiculous nature of it all, right? So at the moment we have one rail-enabled ferry in service. So down here in Dunedin we have the Hillside Works, which is making and refurbishing rail rolling stock carriages and that sort of thing. So yeah, they come down on that ferry. But what Kiwi Rail is talking about is the actual rails themselves need to be transported on a rail carriage. They can't go on a truck. They're too long.
You mean the physical, hang on, when you say the rails, the physical rails that the wheels sit on.
Rails that make a railway are made in the North Island and need to be transported on a rail carriage on a ferry. So if these new ferries that Nicky is talking about are not rail enabled, that means that the current rail enabled ferry remains the only option for that, which is it's at the end of its life now.
Wow.
And then everything we've talked about freight shipments. So you can rail travel freight to the port, and then it needs to be taken off the railway carriage, put on a truck, and then the process reversed at the other end, which obviously takes time. It takes space, it takes more staff. It's just double handling everything
and
on each end.
But it's also basically just going, this fleet of trucks, they're just going to be used to sit on the ferry because they're going to drive onto the ferry, drive off the ferry, unload, drive onto the ferry, drive off the ferry, unload.
You can see that they have these special little wee shunting trucks that go on the ferry. They don't leave the port. And we have those options now because, you know, most of the ferries are not rail enabled. I've spoken at length about this government's absolute lack of vision and long-term thinking, and this is just shining a big ass spotlight on it.
Yeah. All right.
We're looking at several severe challenges in this country. We have a growing population and everything that goes with it. We needed bigger ferries. We're not going to get them. We're looking at a critical infrastructure project. And like I keep mentioning this, the Southern Fault could go at any moment.
Yeah.
And it's just like nobody's thinking about that. It probably happened in my lifetime. It's crazy. Yeah, it takes landlords are happy. Yeah, that's why we're not doing it. And remember that every time.
Let's get to the end of this.
Yeah, so once again, let's just tie-ho until our pawpaw brings that result.
But as part of the negotiations over the policy, 3 News understands that Winston Peters has been given ministerial responsibility for rail. Not that he would confirm it.
How much will New Zealand be better off having a New Zealand First Minister in charge of Kiwi Rail again?
I reckon you better go and see your leak because it's got everything wrong.
I think it's really important that Kiwi Rail get their act together, though.
They will with Winston in charge, won't they?
No. I mean, there's a lot of management challenges and a need for them to be a lot more industrially proficient.
Again, we'll talk about ferries when we're ready to make the announcement. As I said,
make more concessions than that.
We'll have more to say about it very shortly.
A decision coming soon, though so is Christmas.
Well, Jenna,
that was a good one. That was a good line at the end. So it's Christmas. That was a pretty good report, though. Overall, good scoop there. There's a game you play in theatre sports where you need to try and make the person say yes or no. So you're not allowed to say yes or no. Mm-hmm. And the way you get people all the time who are good at it, you basically repeat something back to them. So you say something to me and I repeat it back to you. Oh, did you just say yes? And they go, no, I didn't say yes. Oh, and that's what she basically was doing to the politicians when she asked about Winston there. She was trying to get them just to go in there. Look, this is just things of nightmares because they're going to do the shell game that we've been talking about since pre-election, and they're going to say, well, technically, what we're paying for these lesser quality. Remember what we said? We said they will pay more and they will get less. We just found out that they're going to pay $900 million for a lesser product than the world-class 2 other ones, which would have cost them $550. So they're going to try and sell it as they're paying less. Okay, let's include the break fees. Okay, let's include the ports that you're making other people. What's the overall budget now? Forget if it's just not the government, but the whole thing. And it's guaranteed to be more than $3 billion for a lesser product, Chewie. It's just an absolute nightmare. These guys, man, talk about economic vandals. Like, this is actual vandalism because this is going to impact New Zealand for the next 50 years.
It's sabotage.
Yeah.
Sabotage and vandalism. And look, I know we know that there's media that watches this show. I beg of you.
I
beg of you on my fucking hands and knees, compare these 2 projects and what's being spent at their full extent. Like, if they're going to cut out the wharf infrastructure out of the project to make it look like we've saved a lot of money, go to the ports and say, how much are you going to have to spend? Ports of Wellington, Picton.
Yeah.
Because we want to include it in a like-for-like comparison. What's the tonnage? What's the tonnage of freight? How much time is going to be lost by double handling freight on both ends? How much is a facility that makes railway lines going to cost to set up in the South Island?
Sounds like we need to get Craig. We need to get Craig Rennie on. Craig Rennie is the man that works all those things out to the cent. Sounds like we need to message Craig. Hey, Craig, do you want to come on? Sure, we will.
It still hasn't been confirmed how much we're paying the Koreans for supplying nothing.
Yeah.
Like, these are all things that need to be put out on the line like linen after you've shit the bed. because that's what Nicola's done. She has shit this bed and has spent the majority of the year going, don't look at my shitty sheets. I didn't shit the bed. Somebody else was in my house beforehand and shit the bed.